Someone was living in their attic for weeks, while the family slept below, and they never knew. Bavaria, Germany, 1922. A remote farmstead, surrounded by dense forest. An hour's drive from Munich, half a mile behind the nearest town. The Gruber family had lived there for decades. Andreas Gruber, 63 years old. His wife, Cecilia, 72. Their daughter, Victoria, 35. Her daughter, little Cecilia, 7. Her baby son, Josef, 2. And the new maid, Maria Baumgartner. Maria had arrived that Friday afternoon. It was her first day. It was also her last. Something had been wrong at Hinterkaifeck for months. 6 months before the murders. The family's previous maid had quit without warning. She told people the farmhouse was haunted. She said she heard footsteps coming from the attic at night. She said doors would open on their own at midnight. She said she felt constantly watched. Andreas Gruber did not believe her. But in March 1922, just days before the murders, he started to wonder. He found a newspaper from Munich lying in the farmhouse. Nobody in the family subscribed to that paper. Nobody nearby had bought it. Nobody could explain where it had come from. Then the keys disappeared. A set of house keys simply vanished. And then came the detail that should have made Andreas Gruber run. He went outside after a snowstorm and found footprints. They led from the edge of the dark forest, across the snow, to his front door. He followed them back toward the forest. They did not go back. The footprints led in. They did not lead out. Someone had walked out of the woods and into his farm and had not left. Andreas told his neighbors. They offered to help. He refused. He never told the police. On the evening of March 31st, 1922, the killer struck. Sometime between 6 and 7 in the evening, as darkness fell over the Bavarian countryside, each member of the family was lured one by one out to the barn. Andreas first, then Cecilia, then Victoria, then little Cecilia, each one killed with a mattock, a heavy farming tool, blows to the head. Then the killer moved into the farmhouse. Baby Josef in his crib. Maria the maid in her bedroom. Both killed with the same weapon. 6 people in one evening. The mattock was found hidden in the barn loft. A second blood-covered mattock was later found in the attic during the demolition of the farm. 4 days passed before anyone found them. On April 4th, a neighbor named Lorenz Schlittenbauer grew concerned when mail began piling up at the local post office. Young Cecilia had missed school for 2 days. Victoria had not appeared at church, where she was a member of the choir. The chimney of the farmhouse had been smoking throughout those 4 days. Schlittenbauer and 2 other neighbors walked to the farm. They found the front door locked. They went to the barn, and they found them. 4 bodies in the hay. Andreas, Cecilia, Victoria, and little Cecilia. The investigators who attended the scene noted something that would become the most disturbing detail of the entire case. Young Cecilia had not died from the first blow. She had lain in that barn for hours, beside her dead family. She had torn out chunks of her own hair. Her head had several bald patches. The doctor believed she had died slowly, from a combination of her injuries and shock. But what investigators found next changed everything. In the 4 days between the murders and the discovery of the bodies, someone had been living at Hinterkaifeck. The cattle had been fed. The cows had been milked. Food had been cooked in the kitchen. Fires had been lit in the hearth. A page had been torn from the kitchen calendar. And neighbors had reported seeing smoke from the chimney. Every day since the murders. One neighbor said he thought he had seen one of the Grubers outside the farm. The killer had not left. After murdering 6 people, they had stayed, sleeping in the family's beds, eating the family's food, tending to the family's animals, for 4 days, in a house with 6 bodies. When the police arrived and searched the property, they made another extraordinary discovery. The killer had almost certainly been in the house when the neighbors discovered the bodies. But nobody saw them leave. Were they still there when the police arrived? Had they been living there all along, not just after the murders, but for days or weeks before them? The footprints in the snow, the noises in the attic, the missing keys, the unexplained newspaper, the previous maid, who heard footsteps every night and felt constantly watched. The theory that terrified investigators most was this. The killer had been living in the attic of Hinterkaifeck for weeks before the murders, watching the family below, learning their routines, waiting. The investigation produced several suspects. Lorenz Schlittenbauer, the neighbor who found the bodies, had a complicated history with the family. He had publicly claimed baby Joseph as his own child. He had intimate knowledge of the farm and its routines. He had been seen visiting the demolished farm site 3 years after the murders. When asked why he was there, he said the killer's attempt to bury the family in the barn had been stopped by frozen ground. Nobody had told him this detail. He died in 1941, having never been charged. A second suspect, Adolf Gump, was connected to a far-right paramilitary organization operating in Bavaria at the time. He was investigated and released. Karl Gabriel, Victoria's husband, was officially listed as killed in action in World War I. But some investigators believed he had survived, that he had returned, that he had discovered the family's darkest secret, and murdered them in a rage. Military records indicate he died at the Battle of Arras. But the records of 1914 were not always reliable. And then, in a final deeply strange twist, the victims' heads were removed from their bodies after the autopsies and sent to Munich to be examined by clairvoyants for metaphysical clues. The skulls of the 6 Hinterkaifeck victims were subsequently lost. Their current whereabouts are unknown. In 2007, students from the police academy in Fürstenfeldbruck re-examined the case using modern investigation techniques. They announced they knew who the killer was, but they would not reveal the name, out of respect for the perpetrator's descendants who still live in the area. The farmhouse at Hinterkaifeck was demolished in 1923. Nobody would live there. A small concrete memorial stands today on the empty land where the farm once stood, 70 kilometers north of Munich, in the Bavarian countryside. The land is empty. The case is unsolved. Somewhere in Bavaria, in a family tree that nobody has been allowed to name, are the descendants of the person who lived in that attic, who walked out of the forest in the snow, who never walked back, and who stayed for 4 days after the killing in a silent farmhouse with 6 bodies, waiting for someone to notice.